Hi yogis, if there is one thing that I wish I had known at the start of my yoga practice, it would have been to train my hip flexors. We've got two main hip flexors, which are your iliacus and your psoas muscle. And they are both like really imperative to active and strong yoga poses, but also they are really important just for day-to-day life. A lot of people, almost everyone has weak, short or tight hip flexors, and we think that stretching them and stretching them is the thing that's going to make them stop hurting in our yoga practice, when in fact it's actually not the muscles we should be stretching. Adductors are the ones we should be stretching, and the rest of our muscles evenly, but hip flexors, they need to be strengthened as well. So there's not a whole lot, unless you put a lot of mindfulness into practicing, there's not a whole lot that we can do for our hip flexors unconsciously in a yoga practice, unlike our hamstrings. But here are my top 5 favorite hip flexor strengthening practices. So let's get started. We're going to need 2 blocks. If you don't have blocks, use cans of beans, you can use dumbbells, you can use whatever you've got. You can even just use one thing. So we're going to start out in a wide posture, and the blocks are going to start out on the insides of your shins. Now it helps just to sort of like take a bit of time to settle in to your hips a little. And sitting up nice and tall, you can plug your hands into the floor. That makes it easier. Make it a little bit more challenging. Bring your hands to your heart. And coming forward rather than backwards is going to be a little bit more challenging too. So we're going to try and go for 10 on one leg and 10 on the other leg, skipping over the block. So let's go for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, last one over, out cheers. Let's do the other side. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and relax. That was terrible. Let's try again. So we can go for the blocks on a slightly higher setting. We're just going to go for a couple on each side. Make sure that you bend and unbend your knees, give your hips a little break. So we're going to go for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and bring it all the way back over, technically 6. Other side, we're going to go for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and last one, come all the way over. So that's my first exercise. You can work up to a higher setting. You can even work up to a double high setting, but remember, the more that you're leaning back, the easier that's going to be. So we're going to ditch one of the blocks, unless of course you don't have a lot of flexibility in your inner thighs. You're going to take a block to the center. You're going to sit up nice and tall, flex your toes, squeeze your quads, bring your hands to your heart, take a breath, and you're going to slowly try to tap your block and squeeze down to lift yourself back up. We're going to go for 10. If you're finding that's easy, you might like to take your block to a lower setting. Remember, this is totally cheating. This hinging forward is not cheating. So I'm at the 5 mark. I'm going to flip my block to a little bit of a lower setting and see if I can take this down lower. Didn't quite make it that time. Oh, that's nice. Awesome. Coming down lower. Might try on the lowest setting. You could even do it all the way to the floor. It's the hinging back up that we want to stay nice and controlled, nice and engaged. Even the hinging down can be slow, controlled, and active. Let's go for one more. Really nice. Bring it back up. I'm already in pain. So from here, take your hands underneath your knees, slowly close your legs. Give yourself a little squeeze. The next posture is pretty challenging one, so you can modify it in a various amount of ways. The hardest version of this is actually from a reverse plank. So you're going to take your hands, palms down, fingertips face towards your sits bones. You're going to straighten out through the arms, come into your reverse plank pose. So that's heels down, bums on, belly on, nice and long through the crown of the head, and squeeze one of your hips up and then lower that leg down. Awesome. Squeeze the other one up and lower down. That's a big one for the core. Now remember, if that seems like too much too soon, you could come down to your forearms, but doing this isn't gonna train the hip flexors and the core, so you have to be really mindful of tucking your belly in, tucking your tail under, bracing the core, tuck your chin, and really squeeze, squeeze, squeeze up into the chest and extend long. Nice, other side, squeeze it up into the chest and extend long. Nice, I'm gonna come back to that plank, a nice halfway point. Instead, for this last couple of rounds, you could come to your feet to the floor to an altar pose and do the same thing, but again, being mindful that you need to tuck your tail, squeeze your belly in order to be able to access those hip flexors. So once you've done a couple more of whichever one you've chosen, I'm going to come back down to the forearms, squeezing in and extending out, squeezing in and extending out. We're just going to come to lie on the back. So it's a similar kind of action. I'm just going to inchworm down my mat. It's a similar kind of action here. You're going to interlace fingers around the top of your right knee to start with. Keep your foot flexed. Your left leg will extend long on the floor. Now, I want you to imagine that you're stepping up against a wall and you can just drive your bottom heel into that wall, squeeze your left butt cheek, squeeze your left quads. That whole leg is super active. And then you're going to let go of your arms. You might even like to take them palms down or palms up on the floor beside you. Now you're going to keep that leg nice and pulled in towards your chest. So that's going to make sure your hips are flexing using your muscles. And then you'll extend your leg long, push straight through your heels, squeeze your quads, and then you're going to drive it all the way back in. Now remember, minimizing the movement of the pelvis is key here. We want to make sure there's a little glute squeeze of the left butt cheek, a little bit of action through the right butt cheek as well, and pulling, pulling, pulling in with minimal pelvic movement. We've got 3, 2, 1, and bring it all the way back down to the earth. My hip flexors are burning and I've only done a couple of these exercises. So we're going to hug that left knee in. Now, whilst you're here hugging the left knee in, just to start off with, if you have a TheraBand or a booty band or something that you use for resistance training that is elastic, any kind of band, you can actually train your hip flexors with both feet in the band and doing that same movement. You're just going to make sure your band's nice and strong. Now from here, you're going to squeeze your butt, your quads, your foot, everything's super active. Pull your left knee up and try and keep it as close as you can using your core. And then you're going to extend through your left leg, nice and strong, keeping the right one active, and then pull it all the way into your chest. Minimal pelvic movement. You can use your exhale, like you're blowing air into a balloon, to try and activate a little bit more through your lower abdominal muscles as you kick. Nice, so really squeezing it up, maintaining lots of engagement in the left side. We've got another 5, 4, 3, 2, last one, big press, and bring yourself all the way back together. Hug your knees in towards your chest. Give yourself that little squeeze. Awesome. Now just take your hands on top of your knees. Draw a couple of little circles, giving the hip flexors just a little rest. Really nice work. Now rock and roll up and down. My last favorite hip flexor training is from a half split position. So you can take a hold of one of your blocks if you need a little bit of extra help. So what you're going to do is just from hands and knees, step one of your feet as far forward as you can, keep inchworming that forward, and then pull yourself back to that half split position. Use your hand on a block if you need to, and you're just going to look at your front foot and lift it up and hold it for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and relax. Really nice. It's harder than it looks. Now you can try this hands free. Extend your leg forward, hold it here for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and relax. Awesome. Now pull your leg back, switch to the opposite side, find that lunge, maybe left hand or opposite hand comes to a block, and you're gonna pull back to that split, and you're gonna hold it here for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You're gonna place it back down and go for that second round. Nice. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and bring it all the way back down. So those are my top 5 hip flexor training exercises, training drills for strengthening your yoga practice, but not only strengthening your yoga practice, strengthening your hip flexors just for day-to-day life is super important for balance, for core strength, for stability, and for pain-free hips. So let me know in the comments how you feel about these exercises. Were they easy? Were they hard? And I'll see you next time.